that goes back to something that I talk to people about, in terms of picking their co-founders or the founding team. You've got to do a huge amount of, I believe, diligence on who your founding partners are, the same amount as you would do in your life partner. And I see a number of examples where 12 months in, a founder is saying, I really wasn't expecting that from my co-founder. He or she is not putting in the same energy. So we've got a misalignment here. Maybe we've also got a misalignment around ambition or EQ, all of those things. So you've really got to understand who's going to be in the ditch with you, and can you get out of that ditch?
How do you do that though, John, from your experience? Because this is a story I've heard, and often I hear it off mic. We'll be chatting away and do the episode, wrap it up, and they're like, now what I couldn't say about your man or your one is this.
Yeah.
And you're like, oof, that sounds traumatic. And they're having this massive co-founder split. I've heard it a lot.
Yeah.
And it's more common than it isn't, unfortunately. So
Absolutely.
how can founders listening, number one, vet people they should work with? And number two, create structures like you had, whereby, look, it's all very transparent.
Well, I think you've got to work on it. Like any relationship, you got to work on your relationship with your life partner, and you maybe take it. You drink a lot of coffee before you put a piece of ink on paper to decide to do something, and you get to know that individual, and you test that individual, and they test you, to see if there's a level of compatibility here. And I don't mean that we both have to think in the same way. I'm thinking that, we're both generally pointing in the same direction, that our values are somewhat similar. And even at that, it's a risk in the same way as I'm next month, we're married 37 years.
It's important you got that one right now. That was going to be important. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
That's an incredible achievement.
In fact, we were married on the 14th of May, 1988. It was a super day, because that was the day that Liverpool were beaten by Wimbledon in the FA Cup final.
You always got to find these tricks to remember things. That's a good one. I like that one.
Laurie Sanchez scored a goal. John Aldridge missed a penalty. But all joking aside, I think in my journey, having a life partner that was prepared to go on this journey, was prepared to give up the holidays and not have the nice car and all of that kind of thing for quite a long time. It requires that amount of diligence in your business partner as you've done in your life partner.
Why do people skip it so often?
Why
do people skip that stage so often with a co-founder? Why do they rush to commit?
It can only be down to lack of understanding or the buzz of thinking you're going to start a company.
Yeah,
and you're always looking at it. It's this is how it's going to go.
You only see the up.
Yeah, we have done I think 5 acquisitions. Over first one we did in 2010, and I think one of the things we learned after number 1 or number 2 is that you do the commercial, you do the legal, you talk to their customers, you look at their technology, you look at their proposition. For the first 1 or 2, we didn't look at their culture. And if you're acquiring a business, you need to do due diligence on their culture. Can they mesh together? Without mentioning names, I remember a long time ago, I was in a meeting with a very large insurance company in Dublin, and we were doing a project, and I was going in as the project sponsor. I had been briefed by the team. Everything seemed to be going well. I walk into a room and I'm slaughtered, and what's going on here? And I'm walking out of the room, and the CIO walked to the lift with me, and he said, "Look, I'm really sorry about that." And I said, "What's all that about?" And he said, "We bought this company 20 years ago, and they're still struggling to realize that we bought them.
Oh, Jesus.
Right?
20 years.
20 years ago, yeah. And they're names that you know.
Yeah.
Okay. And no doubt some big professional services firm like KPMG got a shed load of money to do the due diligence, but nobody looked at the cultural way that business was run.
Talk to me then about like what you look for, because I think this is really interesting. Like, what do you look for
in an acquisition, or
we're kind of skipping over and back here, but like, because you said something really interesting at the start. I'm actually going to kind of weave my way back there. Like, you work with a lot of founders now.
Yeah.
Just while we're on the kind of searching for people piece, I think this is interesting to kind of stay within it. You say you work with a lot of like founders and startups. That's a big commitment as well on your behalf. So what do you look for in them? Because this is a commitment, right? You're probably looking at like 5 to 10 years here.
Yeah. And
so
it's a time and a financial commitment.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
and you can only do so many.
Yeah,
you know, you have to pick the right ones, especially when it's someone like you and your time is so bloody valuable that you have to pick well.
Yeah.
So what do you look for in founders to go, yes, these are the green flags that I look for within them? And similarly, what sends up a red flag where you're like, not in a million years, I don't care how good the product is?
Like this is incredibly topical at the moment in one or two companies that I'm working with. And, you know, everybody will look to hire A players, okay? But, you know, they can afford to hire A players, okay? If they're hiring C players who have the capacity to get to B player, they're doing bloody good, okay? Because maybe those people will take a lower salary and the option of some ESOP or similar on as the business grows. So you might have to pepper it with one or two A players, and they would probably be your founders. And then you've got to build a batch of C plus, maybe B players. So I think that's really important. You know, and I say to founders, you know, you're not going to be able to afford a complete management team of A players. You're just not going to be able to do it. It's going to cost you a lot of cash, and you're going to have to give away a lot of ESOP.
Thank you. The amount of time some people have given me that advice, I was going to say the word bullshit advice, and it's like, only hire A players, and you're like, come on, like, that's such an obvious thing, and it's completely not realistic. You're the first person, I think, to sit there and go, look, that's not realistic, because A, they're not walking around on the street. If they are, they're getting paid a huge ton of money. A players know they're A players. That's the thing. People are like, oh, I can blah, blah, blah. Or they're doing their own thing. So you're the first person to actually sit there and go, look, here's the reality.
And it is the reality. You know, I also think as a leader that you have a responsibility to grow people. And that takes a lot of time. And if you're just bringing in, whether it's a startup or a mature business, if you're just bringing in the A players from outside, there's a cultural problem there. Because what you're saying to the people down here who are in the B or C, well, actually, you're not good enough. Where really, as a leader, what I should be doing is putting some of those people on some sort of an accelerated program that can get them up to a B plus or similar.